The man sneaked into the girl's house to collect a debt. But strangely, the girl ignored him completely. She simply took a moldy piece of bread and hid in a corner to eat it. The man paid no attention to the girl and continued searching everywhere. But after searching every corner of the house, he found nothing. He asked the girl in a harsh tone where all the valuable items in the house were hidden. But the girl remained silent. After several inquiries and attempts to probe further, he finally realized that the girl was deaf and blind, a person with sensory impairments. He felt a pang of sympathy and wasn't sure whether to continue searching. The girl's mother owed him a lot of money, but she had been involved in an accident at work. As the acting team leader, the man had to go to the hospital to visit her. But to his surprise, the woman had already become a cold corpse. Since no relatives of the deceased could be found, the police could only hand over the mother's belongings to the man. He was deeply frustrated, unsure how to recover the money owed to him. So he followed the address to the woman's home, hoping to find something of value to offset the debt. But after a thorough search, he found nothing. He could only pin his hopes on the girl's father. Upon learning of his wife's tragic death, the man not only showed no signs of grief but instead berated him and said they had already divorced, then hung up the phone. The man, feeling depressed, lit a cigarette on the balcony. The girl smelled the familiar cigarette smoke and thought her mother had returned. She pounded on the floor, gesturing for her mother to come quickly. The man was confused and approached, but the girl immediately threw herself into his arms. It wasn't until she touched his face that she suddenly realized he wasn't her mother. He screamed in terror. The scream quickly caught the landlord's attention. To avoid further complications, the man had no choice but to open the door for the female landlord outside. But before he could explain anything, the female landlord mistakenly thought he was the girl's father. She berated him with the harshest words, saying he was an unfit father, and urged him to pay next month's rent immediately. Otherwise, she would refund the deposit at the end of the month, and told him to take the girl and move out. Hearing that there was a deposit to be refunded, the man saw a glimmer of hope. He decided to play along and claimed he was the girl's father, promising to move out next month. Seeing that the landlord didn't suspect anything, he secretly rejoiced, thinking the deposit was as good as his. But when he returned to his place, his belongings had already been thrown out by the landlord, as he simply couldn't afford to renew the lease. His first thought was to stay temporarily at the girl's house and move out after receiving the deposit next month. The girl touched the leather shoes by the door and realized they weren't her mother's. It must be that man returning. She nervously took a piece of bread and hid in the corner to eat it, perhaps out of sympathy. The man ordered 2 bowls of fried sauce noodles and handed one to the girl. Smelling the aroma, the girl swallowed her saliva many times, but in the end, she didn't eat a single bite. In her heart, this man was still a threat. To ease the girl's concerns, he deliberately hid the shoes by the door, making her think he had left. He then threw away all the moldy bread. But when the girl couldn't find any bread on the table, his emotions erupted, and he burst into tears. The man quickly brought over the fried sauce noodles, gesturing that they were better, but the girl swatted it away. He finally lost his patience and vented his anger with the harshest words. But seeing the girl crying, he couldn't help but soften his heart and bought her fresh bread again. When she smelled the fresh bread again, the girl suddenly realized that the man wasn't so bad after all. She followed the scent of the fried sauce noodles to the man's side and grabbed the noodles with her hands, eating them greedily. The man was upset, but he still gave the noodles to the girl and grabbed the bread to fill his stomach. From then on, the girl gradually let down her guard. She believed that her mother would return soon and that this man must have been hired by her mother to take care of her. Unfortunately, the man couldn't even do basic housework, so she had to hire a cleaner, who quickly tidied up the house. Gradually, the girl came to accept the man. At night, she would sleep next to the man. This was something she had only done with her mother before. Now, when she missed her mother, she could only cuddle up to the man. Perhaps because her longing was too heavy, the girl suddenly began vomiting uncontrollably. The man carried her to the hospital in the middle of the night, but the hospital had already closed for the day. He carried her all night long. From that day on, the girl became increasingly dependent on the man, and the man's feelings for the girl grew increasingly genuine. He paid out of his own pocket to send the girl to a special school. But after learning that the girl was a patient with both visual and auditory impairments, the teacher refused to accept her. But the man refused to give up and bought many simple educational toys. He used the most direct tactile methods to teach the girl to read and write, and the girl was very smart. She learned quickly each time. The only exception was the word father, which she always wrote incorrectly as bread. Just then, the court suddenly came knocking, seizing all the property in the girl's home on the grounds of unpaid debts, including the deposit for the house. This was the man's only hope, now shattered without warning, until he saw the girl's mother's final notes, discovering that the girl's aunt still owed a loan of $3,000. This was the only lifeline in their dire situation, so he set off on a journey to find his aunt, taking the girl and her mother's ashes with him. This journey would also become a journey of mutual redemption for the man and the girl. Since he didn't have his aunt's exact address, he could only ask around along the way. But after several days, he had no leads. The provisions he had brought were slowly running out. Since he had no money left, he took advantage of the absence of others to steal a watermelon from a melon patch. He thought he had done it flawlessly, but unbeknownst to him, The entire scene had been captured by a security camera. This was the first time the girl had ever eaten a watermelon. The man spat the seeds into the girl's palm, signaling that she shouldn't eat them. But the girl playfully spat the seeds onto his face. In the afternoon, a heavy rain began to fall. The man was too exhausted to do anything but rest in the car. But the girl kept pestering him to go out and play. He couldn't resist her and reluctantly agreed. The cool breeze from the west, the refreshing rain, the earthy fragrance, and the freshness of the grass. All these natural beauties illuminated the girl's once dark world like a beam of light. They also subtly changed the man's heart. He would go to great lengths to make the girl happy, and gently took her hand, to let her feel the shapes of various objects, and patiently taught her to write their names in the palm of her hand. Just then, the owner of the melon field found them. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the man had no way to defend himself. Since he couldn't afford to compensate him, he could only work off the debt in the melon shed. Seeing how diligently he worked, the woman didn't hold his melon stealing against him. Instead, she invited them to eat together. The girl chewed the food repeatedly in her mouth, then suddenly spat some out and offered it to the man's lips. The man did not understand the girl's intention, and, with a look of disgust, threw away the food she had offered. The old man beside him explained that this was how children expressed their affection. Only those they considered important would be shared such food they deemed delicious. Hearing this, the man fell silent. From childhood to adulthood, he had never been cared for in such a way. He had also never genuinely given to others. During the time he spent with the girl, he gradually grew to love this simple and unassuming life. Whenever he was with the girl, his face was always filled with an unstoppable smile. Thus, he decided to abandon the idea of collecting the debt. He wanted to stay here and live with the girl forever. He found the woman and asked her to help him find a job. He wanted to stay and accompany the girl as she grew up. The woman was moved by his kindness and immediately agreed. She even let them stay in her home for free. From that day on, the woman also became involved in the girl's upbringing. She would record videos of them playing together and upload them to her social media. She would also sew beautiful clothes for the girl by hand. Though she couldn't see or hear, the girl could truly feel their love. They thought their days could continue in this peaceful and happy way. But the boss's appearance completely shattered this beautiful time. It turned out that the boss had also seen the woman's shared videos. He followed the address to find this place. They beat the man up severely. They cursed him with the most vulgar language for violating the company's rules. They also reminded him with ill intent that he was just a thug. And it was precisely this statement that completely shattered the man's heart. The girl seemed to sense his sorrow. She gently blew on his face to ease his pain. The man was moved to tears by this small gesture. He let the girl touch the tears at the corner of his eyes and wrote the word tears on his palm. The girl seemed to sense something but couldn't put it into words. She simply leaned her head against the man, signaling for him not to leave her. The next morning, when the woman opened the door, the room was empty. Only a letter remained on the ground. After a night of contemplation, the man decided to send the girl to an orphanage. Perhaps staying here was the better choice. But before leaving, he bought the girl her favorite bread and doll, and apologized to her over and over again. Then he quietly left with his luggage. For the girl, he could neither see nor choose. It wasn't until much later that she suddenly realized the man she had long regarded as her father was gone. She didn't want the bread or the doll. She only wanted her father to return to her side. She pounded on the glass, crying hysterically. The man, who couldn't bear to leave her, hadn't gone far. He stood silently outside the window, his heart torn with pain. Though there was no blood relation, he had already regarded the girl as his daughter. Finally, he opened the glass door. When the familiar touch returned to his fingertips, the girl angrily slapped the man. The man let the girl slap him, lowering his head, already sobbing uncontrollably. The girl grabbed the man's hand and wrote the word dad on it. In that moment, the man's eyes welled up with tears as he tightly embraced the girl in his arms.